Get ready to ride along for another exciting episode of No Driving Gloves, where Derek, John, and Will use over 75 years combined industry knowledge to bring you a bare-knuckled view on the collector car hobby. So let's get rolling. Welcome back, everybody. We're here a little bit early and a little bit by surprise because we had a slight computer error, and it was probably between the keyboard and the chair. The episode that released Thursday morning was not supposed to release until Sunday morning, and we're telling you we're going to start releasing on Monday, so we had to have something on Monday. Unfortunately, because of that, Will can't join Derek and I tonight. We all have lives and things going on, and Will's got family in town this weekend. Derek and I are just going to do a quick little show in order to keep our promise to you about having episodes out on Mondays. The nice thing about this is after the show recorded last Wednesday, that was an early release, we got talking about some traveling that I have to do. On, I guess, Thursday, I'll swing by and see Derek at his office in Kentucky and visit with him and have lunch. Then I'm going to drive up to the Mid-Ohio motorcycle swap meet at the Mid-Ohio racetrack in Lexington, Ohio, and I'll be hanging out there on Friday, and then I'm turning around and driving to Columbus, Ohio, and I'm going to meet Will up there. Well, he'll be showing a 56 Chevy that was recently featured on Scotty D TV, and Will and I'll hang out a little bit. Maybe we'll catch up with a couple of listeners in Columbus. With a little bit of luck and a little bit of hope from Amazon Prime, maybe I'll have a pocket recorder by then. Maybe we can grab a couple of interviews while we're at Good Guys. So if you're out and about, you can see me, and like I said, AMA Vintage Days at Mid-Ohio, or Will or I at the Good Guys in Columbus. So that does give us an opportunity to let you know on that, since I'll take the blame. I'm the one who released the podcast and making Derek stay up late here on a Friday night so that we can record it. And talking about a topic, though, that's rough because Will had such a unique perspective on everything. We can't come up with a topic that's really good to discuss without him here. So Derek and I are going to chat about kind of our favorite cars, maybe the favorite cars we've owned, favorite cars of all time. And if anybody knows me, I'm a huge CRX fan. I've done CRXs for years. Derek, where are you on all this?
I like so many different cars, and I've played with so many different cars and owned quite a few different cars over the years. It's hard. One of my favorite cars, and a car I often sometimes think about going out and trying to locate it and get it back, is really one of the very first cars that kind of was mine in a way, and that I did most of the restoration work on, and that was the 1974 Pontiac GTO that I owned back in basically late high school and early college days. Loved the car, had a blast in it. Nobody likes, well, I shouldn't say nobody, but not a lot of people like the 1974 Pontiac GTO because it was the year they made it out of the Nova body style, or the Ventura body style, instead of the Le Mans Tempest body from Pontiac. But that's been a strong candidate for one of my favorite cars that I've actually owned.
Doesn't surprise me. It's a little bit of an oddball car, and over the years, like I say, I've always said I've got this little fetish for front-wheel drive Chrysler products. My first car was a 1980 Dodge Omni 024. Lots of luck finding one for sale. They pop up occasionally, but early 80 Chrysler with a Volkswagen motor in it, and they didn't last, and I was guilty of some of that. I think I blew the head gasket 2, if not 3 times in that car, and it was my first car. I beat the heck out of it.
Yeah, but see, blowing the head gasket, it's a good learning experience. You got to work on it, you got to replace the head gasket. So it's a valuable learning experience.
You have my teen years in a fog there, and when I was 16, I really didn't work on cars. We lived in a neighborhood that you couldn't take a car apart in the driveway, so my dad listens to this podcast, and thanks, Dad, for paying for that work a couple of times. probably at this point I can say I was definitely guilty of one of them. I think one was the car itself. I went through the 024 and went to a pickup truck. Had a good time with it. It never had a failure. It was an old 84 Mazda B2000 Sundowner. It was a fun truck. It was just the beginning of the mini truck craze, which our younger listeners will think of as history. If Will was here, we'd go, ooh, that was our youth, and had fun. Friends from those days, a few of them are going back and building their mini trucks again, and I think Will and I each did that about 10 years ago, went out, bought S10s, and customized them. So it's just that fun, but I always had that thing for the front-wheel drive Chryslers, and it spoiled me. I'm a guy who doesn't, and okay, I may as well admit, I like flappy paddle gear shifts. No, I'm kidding there, but I don't mind a front-wheel drive car. I think a front-wheel drive car has some very interesting handling characteristics, and on most days I can drive a front-wheel drive car faster than I can a rear-wheel drive because I grew up in a front-wheel drive car.
Yeah. I mean, front-wheel drives are cool cars. They're interesting. They've got, and it was funny, you talked a little bit about, history, throwing back that younger visitors think of some of the things we did as kids as history, which scares me sometimes. But one of the things, and we're talking about favorite cars, and for me, one of the things that gets me as the, not only the guy that works on cars and plays with them in my garage or at work, I'm also the historian. And, that part of me, sometimes what gets me about a favorite car is more the history of that car or the history of, that model car or that make car. And I wind up getting more captured by the history of a certain car and the uniqueness of it. And that's what really grabs me and brings me in. Like my 1974 Pontiac GTO, the uniqueness of it being the Ventura body style or Nova body style, Buick Apollo, Olds Omega, those all ran that in 74. But it was also, after doing the research through Pontiac Historical Services, it was one of 687 built in the configuration it was done. It had a 4-speed manual transmission. It was even goofier than just being the Ventura body style. It was the hatchback on top of it. And it was basically the top of the line Ventura custom package. Everything the guy could get on it, he could get on it. Even the custom ordered interior. But he didn't trust that new technology that was out that was, power brakes. So the car was ordered with a full set of manual brakes all the way around. So you can imagine a 1974 Pontiac GTO, the Pontiac 350 engine, 4-speed transmission. It was a quick car. I mean, it wasn't a slow car by any means. And you've got manual drum brakes all the way around.
I was going to say 0 to 60 in what, 12.3 and 60 to 0 in about 1,200 feet, right?
Yeah, exactly. There were a few more than a few probably screeching to a stop, locked up brakes from probably faster than I should have been going in a 1974 Pontiac GTO. But most of the cars that I've fallen in love with or had some favoritism towards, it's not always because they're the greatest driver or the, highest powered engine, or a lot of times it's the goofy story that goes along with them or the really cool story that you can dig into with them. I mean, when I go to Old Car Festival at Greenfield Village, I'm there every year narrating. I run the replica of the 1886 Benz Patent Motorwagen for the Automotive Hall of Fame. I look forward to that show every year, and it's a fantastic show. I mean, any show where you can get 600 to 700 pre-1932 antique cars that are the way they came out of factory, no hot rods allowed, anything like that. That's an interesting day, especially when it's in a setting like Greenfield Village. But I look forward to those 2 days because I get to go run the 1886 Benz Patent Motorwagen replica. And, it's a 1-cylinder engine. It's just the coolest stuff. And it's, of course, oftentimes considered kind of the grandfather of the automobile, the patent that was given to it's the birth certificate of the automobile, all those things you hear people say about it. But just firing it up and getting on it and driving it is an experience like no other. And it's kind of that stuff that kind of leads me to favorite cars a lot of times.
I'll comment on that. A couple episodes, I think we talked about that car and engine sounds. I have found my computer that does have that soundtrack on it. Unfortunately, the video card's bad in it, so I've got to pop in a new video card and get the monitor, and we'll get those sound effects uploaded to one of our social media sites so we can enjoy some of the sounds that you get a relish in. What time of year do you go up there? I can't remember when that happening is.
Yeah, Old Car Festival is
So,
always the weekend after
yeah.
Labor Day. So it's this year, it's like September 8th, 9th, 10th, right around there, I think it is.
About right, because I've got an event that weekend too.
So of course you can't make
unfortunately. Yeah, so it's work. Work seems to get in the way of everything.
Yeah,
so.
work always gets in the way of play. So talking about favorite cars, and we've talked a little bit about our past. What is your let's go with what is your favorite car right now, John?
Are we talking if I was to have unlimited money and I could walk into the car dealership and I have to buy something that's a 2017 model? I'll be honest, I really don't know because I go out. We've just talked about my addiction in buying cars, and that's one of the reasons I haven't bought something in the last like 18 or 19 months. There's nothing out there new, definitely in my price range that I want. And if we get into some of the, things out of my price range, it's really a tough decision because I'll say I'm around a lot of these cars. I have friends with your Huracans, and I think recently I just had a friend order an LP 670, and they're fun. Cars are fun, but I would probably say if I had to do it again, I would go back and order another Caterham, but I wouldn't get the Super Sport 400 or anything. I would want the Caterham 160 with the nice small 4-cylinder, about 180 horsepower, very similar to what I've had in the past with my 77 Series 3 Caterham, which is a continuation of the Lotus 7. But, that's getting really out of people's realms, and that's not the kind of car you think of for a daily driver. It's just hard to say what would I go out and buy. Certain days I go a Corvette would be cool. Would it be? The new Evora 400 kind of turns me on, but at 110 grand, it's better to wait 2 years and probably pick that car up for 80 grand used. I'd really have to think about it. If you gave me a blank check and told me to go buy a brand new car, I don't know what I would buy myself. I know what I would, probably buy the girlfriend and, get her a nice Rolls drop head coupe or something like that, which she would never drive because we've talked she likes small cars, but I think it would be a cool car there. But for me, I don't know. Really, if I was to go out and just spend cash on a car right now, it's going to go back to the past, and I'm going to go get me a second generation CRX because that's the car I crave right now. I see them. I want to say obviously used, but low mileage, in great shape, and they cost just as much as they did brand new at this point. Why I kind of contemplate and go through everything out there. That's the disease we have because I think both of us know everything on the market. I'm going to take that as a lead that what would be your choice if I handed you a blank check and said, come home with something 2016, 2017 model year?
Well, see, that just made it too difficult because you said that because you knew I was going to go with something older. Oh man!
Well, I thought that was the qualifier. It had to be new if I was going to walk out and buy something new. If I go across,
that is a qualifier we can use. Yeah, and I'm kind of the same as you. It's just I don't even know Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. I think I know exactly what I'd buy, and it's probably gonna sound a little ridiculous, but I like the car. It's got good styling, in my opinion. It's a quick car. It's a very fast car. Although I'm not one that's all into speed that much. Obviously, if you guys have been listening, I drive brass air and horseless carriage cars. They don't go very fast. I would probably go straight down to the Cadillac dealership and buy a CTS.
And a kind of a cool car, and I guess it's right there. I'll say my mother most recently purchased, I think, the ATS. I haven't seen it. She kind of did it behind my back. I don't understand that. She have a car person in the family, and they slipped out and
Yeah, but you're a Lotus guy.
they bought.
You know,
Yeah, they bought. Well, don't understand why you wouldn't call and say, "Hey, what do you think?" Instead, I get, "What do you think we paid?" And then you give them a number and go, "Okay, yeah, okay, I guess we did okay."
Yeah, yeah, there you go.
So,
Yeah, but and going between the ATS and the CTS, my thing with the difference in those two, the ATS, it's just a little too soft on the styling, I guess I'll call it. It's very smooth lines. I like the sharper look of the CTS. It would definitely be a CTS coupe. It's just I think it's really, for me, it's something about the styling of that car, even more so than how fast it can go, and the incredible numbers that they've got on it. And it's really, for me, it's about the look of that car. I don't know that there's any other modern car that, for me, would fit a look that I would be going for. And I think that's what makes the CTS kind of my choice for that blank check. If we have to go with a 2016, 17, 18 model year car, if I had a blank check, one of my all-time favorite cars through history, and funny enough, my dad and I have been chasing one for probably about 10 years now, is a 1954 Nash Healey coupe. They only built coupes in 54. There were 90 of them built. That car is probably right there at the top of my favorite cars in history.
you see, you talking about your Cadillac, I clicked a couple of the 2017s that would possibly interest me. The one that I keep seeing on the commercials, and for some reason the styling's been attractive to me, and it doesn't make sense. Maybe it's because Lotus was bought by Greeley and it's kind of Chinese now, or it is a Chinese company. I like the look of the new Buick station wagon they've been promoting lately. I don't know what the car drives like. I haven't seen one in person, but I would be tempted to go to the Buick dealership and maybe test drive that Buick wagon. And the other one, and I know exactly how it's going to feel, but I might have to go drive it, would be the new Civic Type R. Anything I've driven Honda in the last few years, on the manual gearboxes are too slushy. There's no positive notches. I mean, one of my CRXs had solid shifter bushings in it and short throw shifter, and the new ones just shift so gently. When it did come down to buying a car recently, I had this Fiat 500 that had always had given me problems since literally the day after I bought it used. If we ever really go no driving gloves, we'll tell you about that story. But I traded it 6-8 months ago and bought my second Hyundai Velociter. I bought one in 2012 when they first came out, normally aspirated. A little asymmetrical 3-door, 2 doors on the passenger side, 1 door on the driver's side, 6-speed. And that was a fun car. And I decided one day, well, if anybody's going to give me any reasonable amount of money for this non-running Fiat I have, another long story, it might be the Hyundai dealership, because they also owned a Chrysler dealership. And they gave me stupid money on trade. So I went home with a 2016 Hyundai Velociter, which the girlfriend drives a lot. I drive a lot. We bought with the intention of just banking the miles on it, kind of reducing the mileage on our other 2 cars. So the Velociter is probably The car I enjoy the most, the one I bought this time around, wasn't a turbo. Didn't want to pay for a turbo. It's a fun car and gets you around, and it has a little bit of, like I said, I'm a CRX guy. It has a little bit of that CRX styling with kind of the cam back and the vertical rear window, and I'm kind of excited to see what the next Velociter looks like. Hyundai's supposed to release in the next couple of months, and in their new, I think Hyundai's using the letter N for their performance vehicles. Is it N spec Hyundai? I'd have to look that up to be sure. And if you know, please send me an email or comment.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know what they're gonna be bringing out next.
I just kind of pay attention to that because I have one and kind of need to know when this car is going to be obsolete. But like I said, we bought it with the intention of banking a whole bunch of miles on it. She commutes great distances twice a week, so great mileage and free oil changes from the dealership and free wiper blades as long as I do the regular service. They'll do my oil changes and stuff for free. And the intention, I think, is to take this 6-speed and hand it off to the kid when she turns 16. That way nobody will be borrowing her car. We won't have to worry about that. And when she inevitably, like every 16-year-old, and her mom hates it when I say it, has an accident, it won't be in a brand new car, but it'll be in something newer and reasonably safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you talk about that, when you were basically talking about some little sports cars, things like that. So, something popped into my head, and I think you and I think I've talked, with you and Will about this, over time. I don't know if we've talked about it on the actual podcast, though. I had a 2006 Pontiac Solstice. That was a fantastic little car. I had a blast with that car. That's another car that I would probably buy another one to have and use as a daily driver and just have it around for fun. You were just talking about, the shifting and kind of the gentle shifting in some cars, the more positive feel in other cars. And I'll say the Pontiac Solstice, I loved the feel of the shifting in it. It had a lot of pep. I didn't have I didn't have the turboed version, anything like that. Just pretty much stock, basic Pontiac Solstice. Just had a blast driving the car. Funny thing, I only owned it for about 6 months, and the 1923 Peerless we've talked about on other episodes that I own came up for sale, and I had to get rid of something to be able to get the Peerless, so I had to say goodbye to the Solstice. Got rid of that to get the Peerless, and I would own another one of those in probably a heartbeat for the right price.
I've never driven the Solstice or Sky Roadster. I had opportunity to drive one of the GXP coupes that was at the very end of the run. Probably should have bought that car because it was still on the lot after Pontiac died. Brand new. That was a fabulous little sports car. I recently had a conversation with a gentleman who owns some car dealership. Was in that same boat too. I think we've all been there where one car comes along and you need to sell a few other cars so that you can afford it. He had opportunity come up, just saw a car, and he said, I need to call on that. I already have one of those, but I got to see how much. Then he called and the car was available at a price he was comfortable with. It didn't have the original motor. He got talking and the person said, well, we can source you a motor for this car. It's going to be X number of dollars, and we can import that motor for you, and we can do the conversion and put it back to the proper motor for the car. And the guy said, well, to be honest, I've got one of those motors laying in my garage, so I really don't need that. And then as they came to the agreement on the car, they got talking a little bit. The woman said, well, if I may ask, do you know what serial number that motor is you have? And the gentleman said, no, don't have a clue, but I bought it off so-and-so in such and such a state. And the woman, he said, got quiet and said, this is his car. So accidentally, he ended up buying the car that he had the proper motor for. So that'll be reunited. But in the process, he ended up having 5 or 6 really nice cars go up for sale, so he didn't have to reach into the savings account or the retirement account or a bank loan to cover the price of that car. So no matter who you are, sometimes you've got to sell one car to get to another. Like my friend with the LP 670 that he ordered. His problem is he runs out of garage space. He only has so many garage spaces, so when he orders one, he has to sell something else.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the hardest parts of this disease, if you want to call it that, hobby, is making the decision to get rid of one of your cars, and it's just tough. It's a hard thing to do. If I could keep them all, I probably would.
I sit back occasionally and look at my spreadsheet of all the cars I've owned, and I'd like to have this one back for this reason. I'd like to have this one back for this reason. I'd like to have this one back for this reason. Fortunately, there's only a few that I think I really, really would ever buy back, because when I had them, a lot of my cars were, within 5 or 6 years old, so they were still semi-reliable. How reliable is an 89 Mustang going to be today? I mean, you can get in, you can drive it, but it's going to require a little bit more attention than if I went out and bought a 2009 Mustang. Or, as I've said before, since I wrench on cars during the day, when I come home, I want to have a car I don't have to wrench on and I can enjoy. And it's the cobbler's curse. Cobbler's kids never have any shoes, or the mechanics' cars are always broken. We've talked about me being Euro white trash, and I think at the time owned 12 cars, and the only reason something ever got fixed is because we had 11 of them broken and I needed 2 cars running. So through life,
yeah,
we've touched on some of the newer stuff, and like I said, my favorite stuff in my life, I've enjoyed my CRXs while I've had them. I've had multiples of those, which is odd for me because I normally do not go back and buy something I've had in the past. Of course, now 2 Velocitors, and I think I've owned 4 or 5 CRXs, and I owned that Mazda B2000, and a few years later I owned a Ford Courier. I think I mentioned was heavily modified with 231 V6 crammed in it and all this other stuff, but really it's still the same car. I've had my assortment, and whether I have a absolute favorite, I don't know. You asked what would I buy. As I was at Amelia Island a few years back, we were standing there chatting. I was chatting with the guy that was repping the Bugatti Veyrons at the time. And he said, well, you want to take it for a spin? Most of my friends think I'm nuts. I go, no, not really. Because I've kind of learned that be careful what you wish for. It might come true, and you don't necessarily want to meet your heroes because they could turn out to be real works of art, we'll say, to keep this friendly. I've driven a lot of those dream cars and been severely disappointed, and I've decided to keep some of my fantasies. Now, if the new Bugatti, I want to drive that. I want to drive the Chiron, but the Veyron, no. Just never had the desire to. It's just one of those things. Out of my 3 favorite cars in the world, I've driven 2 of the 3, and they still remain on my list. And the third is the 288 Ferrari GTO, which I alluded to in my little 1-minute snippet, is what was on the car magazine, that I fell in love with cars. And 288 GTO, even though it isn't, is the ultimate Ferrari 308. That's the one that, if you gave me a blank check and I could buy any car in history, that would be one I would probably have to go buy, just because I've had a passion for it. What is it, 35 years now?
Oh, is that it? Come on. Yeah, no, you talk about driving some of your your favorite cars and having the opportunity to do that, and I think all of us, Will, yourself, myself, in the jobs we've had, the jobs we have, we get to drive cars that a lot of people don't sometimes have the opportunity to. Some of those, I know in
your case, most definitely.
and that's, in my career, I've gotten to drive some cars that, very few people get to drive. But and there are those times that I get to drive a car that I have had a reverence for since I was a kid. And one of those cars, oddly, you bring up the Bugatti Veyron and the Chiron. I think I alluded to it in maybe the last podcast or one before that. When I worked at Henry Ford Museum, we got the 1931 Bugatti Royale up and running. And one of 6 Royales ever built. I've read about those cars since I was a kid. I've known about those cars forever. I never, ever thought I would have the chance to work on one, let alone drive one. You read everything about them. You read, of course, Bugatti was, Ettore was known for building his race cars. He was not known really for building a really family road car. Let's put it that way. He kind of decided to build these cars, and everything you read about the Royales is that they handle as well as his race cars. And for a 20-foot plus long car, where from the center line of the front axle to the steering wheel, there's just over 7 feet of distance. If you think about it, that's an insane amount of distance, especially when you're thinking about turning and cornering. After we got it running and driving it through the village on test drives, it was one of the easiest driving, really early cars, pre-power steering, that I've ever driven in my life. It just, the engineering that man pulled off and that company pulled off is absolutely incredible. And as you say, that was a time when kind of my hero car, one of my hero cars, if you call them that, definitely did not let me down.
The Royale is kind of interesting to me. I talk about the GTO and that car and driver from '84, and then I think my next car is probably Sonny Crockett's Ferrari Daytona Spider or McBurney Spider. And then the next car that really stands out in history to me is Bill Hara's Bugatti Royale that was bought by Thomas Mohagan of Domino's Pizza. Excuse me if I mispronounced his name.
Monahan.
I know. Monahan?
Yes.
Okay. I say I know he's not into cars anymore, so he's probably not listening to this, but I do apologize. So I was familiar with that, and while I have never driven a Royale, I've been in the presence of them. There's 8 of them in the world, 6 of them in the world.
Yeah, there were 6 built.
Or six and a 7th chassis, maybe.
It gets a little fuzzy, and actually there are 8 now because 2 complete replicas have been built.
I know you, who's had personal hands-on experience with them, and right after Thomas bought that one from the Bill Hara estate auction, that went to White Post Restorations that I worked at. Granted, it was in '88, '89. It was 10 years before I was there. I actually know 2 people that have very intimate time with Royales. And it's, I live vicariously through a lot of friends. Again, it's some of the cars and that I can't have access to. I can get firsthand knowledge. And again, that's why the podcast is here. That's why you're here, is we're hoping to expand our listener numbers for being a 4-episode old podcast. Our listener numbers are fantastic, our downloads, and we hope that we can share this and kind of be the friends of all the guys and girls out there that are listening to this podcast, and we be that, hopefully everybody can think that they know you, and now they're using the Kevin Bacon theory. They're one time separated from a Royale. They're one time separated from, me with the, Cunningham C3 or something like that. We're sharing some of this little bit of life that we've had with the listeners out there.
Are we going to start doing the 6 degrees of Bugatti and the 6 degrees of Cunningham and see?
Well, I don't like playing that game because I know Jay Leno's chief mechanic, guy that runs a Big Dog Garage, and I think you've probably met Leno. I don't know if you have firsthand or not. I've had opportunities, but I've never been able to play them through. And I think once you hit that circle, it's easy because everybody knows Jay. I think that's even closer. I mean, if you're a car guy or whatever, because everybody's been on the Tonight Show or everybody's 2 or 3 people away. So once you know Jay, that 1 degree from him, you're right there with I'm 3 people away from knowing you name
Yeah.
it, and I'm 3 people away from
Yeah,
knowing.
exactly.
So,
Yeah, and you say,
and
yeah, I've had the good opportunity to meet Jay a couple times, give him tours of museums. Not only that, the gentleman who works on his, and I may have mentioned this in one of the previous episodes, the gentleman who works on his Auburn Court Duesenberg collection, the restorer mechanic, is the reason I have the Peerless, the 23 Peerless. Randy's been a good friend for a long time. I have that Peerless because of that connection. It is what it is, I guess. I have people that and family members. Your parents listen to this podcast. Mine don't, fortunately. But my parents are always, oh, you met so and so, and I'm like, they're just another person to me.
I get the question all the time, who's the most famous person that's been through here? You understand where they're coming from, but my response is, can you clarify? And they look at you like you're nuts. I said, do you want an actor? Do you want an athlete? Do you want a race car driver? Do you want a comedian? Tell me, qualify what you want for a celebrity, and then maybe I can pick out a name for you. And it's something that listeners, please, if you want to get into this car hobby, it's networking is a key to getting to where Will, Derek, anybody who's known in the industry. You've got to know people, but you can't meet somebody. You can't go up. We'll use Jay and being kind of obscure. You can't go up to Jay and say, "Hey, Mr. Leno, I love you. You're great. Can I come work for you?" No, he wants to talk to you about his turbine motorcycle. He wants to talk to you about his, 80-foot long, whatever, tank diesel car. He doesn't want to talk about the mundane business thing. Get to know the people and get to be friends with the people. And these things happen organically. It's, you've got to respect them for the car people they are. I go to a lunch most Saturdays, and it's with exotic car people in town. They're the people that own anything, Enzo's, and we talked about the Lamborghini two other times in this episode, and they're there, but there's kind of an unwritten rule. Nobody knows what anybody does for a living, really. These could be drug dealers, they could be landlords, they could be contractors, they could be police officers. You don't know. It never really comes up. Eventually, you might learn what people do for a living, but we don't care about that. We're there because of the cars, and we'll talk an hour, hour and a half every week about the cars. And it doesn't matter if I pull up in my old Porsche Boxster, or you pull up in a brand new Brabus, Brabus Mercedes. It doesn't matter. We're all car people, and it's cool to see, and everybody gets excited, and you live vicariously through everybody. This hobby is networking. If you want to get somewhere, respect your car people for car people, and don't go up pushing it. Yeah, I won't even go to that story at this point, but we'll just leave it there.
Well, and I'll tell you one thing. For any of our listeners, John, Will, a lot of us read car magazines. A lot of us have them laying around, whatever. When I lived in Michigan, I used to go to kind of one of those, get-togethers every first Saturday at a warehouse full of cars. Random people just showed up. You never knew who you were meeting. I was standing in a group of people talking, just talking to this gentleman that was nice as could be, car guy through and through. And I didn't find out until probably, I think it was the next open house I was at, that it was David E. Davis, automotive journalist and just someone who I'd read articles of. And it's about the cars. It's about the passion. It's about that connection that we have. And it doesn't matter who that other person is. It's just, we're talking cars.
I think the Porsche Club and the Viper Club both have a motto, and I'm sure some other clubs do, is very true to the car hobby. And it's the cars brought us together. It's the people that keep making us come back. The cars bring people together, and it's just completely odd, and it's mind-boggling even to me to this day that I know some of the people I do, whether it be through work connections or just car connections. The cars have provided so much opportunity to do so much. Derek, Will, and I are all in special places. A lot of people are, but the people in the car clubs that come up and they say, "Oh, I went to this event," and everyday Joes, and they meet people and they're excited, or they see cars. It's just an interesting conduit to people's personalities. I think it's one of the reasons. I have a passion for cars. I mean, we started out this episode, and Derek pretty much asked me, "You have a blank check. What do you want to go buy?" I don't know, because cars are enjoyable, and the people they bring with them are enjoyable. It really shouldn't matter what you drive. Long as you're enjoying it, you can go ahead and come to the event in whatever. I was at an event 2-3 weeks ago that was heavily populated by Trans Ams. It was the 40th anniversary Bandit Run, but there was a group of 4 people from Sweden that flew over to participate. They own a black Bandit Trans Am in Sweden, but they couldn't ship the car over. And to be honest, nobody really rents 77 Trans Ams. So they ended up renting a Chrysler 300 and put all these little Trans Am stickers, 6.6 liter and Trans Am, and again, our Screaming Chicken decal on the hood. And they went with them. And they were accepted because they're car people. They had a passion. There were 4 of them to fly over from Sweden to drive from Texarkana to Atlanta. That's what makes it fun. That's what I enjoy. I think that's what Derek enjoys when it comes to this hobby. Is we get to do some cool stuff, but we get to talk to even cooler
Yeah,
people.
yeah, and I was gonna do the same thing you just did, which is flip this back to the beginning of the episode when we're talking about favorite cars, and I talked about some of my favorite cars are because of the history, the unique stories of them. Talked about my 1974 Pontiac GTO, and not only the history of that car, the production of it, the story behind it, the GTO, all that. When I really start to think about it, yeah, that's cool stuff that makes me interested in the car, but along with that comes the memories of owning that car. What I did with that car, the people I met when I owned that car. Some of my best friends in my life come from that 1974 Pontiac GTO. A dear friend of mine that writes for actually Hemmings Motor News now. He's a journalist there. Is a great friend because we met in college at Central Michigan University because I owned the Pontiac GTO, he owned a Camaro, and we started a car club at Central Michigan University together with a couple other guys that we found that had 60s, 70s era muscle cars. There's just another part of that history of a car and the memories and the people we've met that makes it one of my favorite cars.
And I mean, it even goes back to the 3 of us here. I did the same thing with Will. I met Will in college, and what's the odds of some guy from Central Illinois who has absolutely no desire to know somebody from Alabama, let alone live in Alabama, become pretty good friends with a guy from Alabama, and then ironically, 15 years later, moved to Alabama and uh, live just down the street from him, or a couple hours down the road. And that's even, I met you, Derek, through cars in a car event, and I wasn't looking for anything out of you, and I don't think, anything out of me. And we kind of had a friendship, and we've stayed in loose communication. But
well,
yeah,
you took me to
it's
you guys took me out to a great dinner. I think it was the last night I was there, and we had a blast with some of the guys from, and that was enough. We talked cars and we had good food.
yeah, but I know some of the people were at the table, and I don't think my boss listens to this.
I hope not.
Well, my wonderful, probably now former boss. But I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. We're shooting for about 25 minutes, and my ticker here is right about 50. We went a little bit long. Like I hinted at the beginning of this, I'll be out and about a little bit this week. I know Will be. We don't like to talk too much about descriptions in time, but if we're going to be out, we're going to tell you. And unfortunately, if you're listening to this in 6 months, that content's not evergreen, as they say. I just spent a good portion of this week redoing our website. Look for a much similar. That sounds wonderful English. And if you listen to me on MakerCast, you'll find out that story. It's a very similar website, much more colorful, a lot more interactive, a little bit easier to get around to the podcasts. If you go to podcast pieces, if you go to nodrivinggloves.com, check it out. We'll go to the outro, and it's going to tell you everything else about our social media. Be sure to follow us. Start telling people about us. Like I said, our downloads are a lot better than I think any of us dreamed, so we must be doing something right. Please give us some feedback, give us some ideas for show topics. If you have some questions, we'll try to answer them here. And be sure to check out our Patreon. There's some levels there that are a little odd for Patreon, but some of those will involve personal consultations where we'll sit down with you and answer some of your restoration questions in private, so be a little bit one-on-one there. That helps cover some of the costs that are associated with doing this. But again, we do this and we're going to do it whether or not you throw a dollar our way or not. We'll look for you in Ohio. We'll look for you in Kentucky. And if you're ever around Alabama, we're always out and about. You have anything else tonight, Derek? Or are we about
I'd just say to our U.S. listeners, happy 4th of July.
Help fund this podcast. We're doing it for fun. We're doing it. If you enjoy it, throw a couple of bucks our way. We'll check us out on Patreon. We've got different reward levels there. Some of those would be personal consultations that kind of go along more with our labor rates. They're kind of aggressive goals, but there's also entry level, and you can get one of the first edition No Driving Gloves stickers or t-shirts, depending where you go. Just wanted to mention that, get that out there. Of course, we're on iTunes, Google Play, said YouTube. I think we've set up on SoundCloud, so we should be out there for you to listen to anywhere. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for this evening, and we'll talk to you later. If you have questions or comments, email us at nodrivinggloves@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe to No Driving Gloves using your favorite podcast catcher. Follow No Driving Gloves, one word, on Facebook or Instagram. And most of all, please check out our page on Patreon where you can help keep our tires rolling.